I first started researching policy and politics, I encountered a lot of questions. A great policy question is, why isn't Canada placing a heavier priority on green emissions? But in political speak, it sounds more like this. Why does the other side care more about the lining their oil and gas friends' pockets? I'm sure you've asked yourself, why doesn't the government do this one thing? Too soon, if they realized they did, they could lose their target demographics' voting interest. All this to say, idealism versus realism in government, media, and overall influence plays a huge role in political fatigue, disinterest, and frustration. Tonight, we're here to talk about it. And welcoming to the show, Kirztyn, Matt, and Aryan. Guys, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks.
I appreciate it. Okay, so I have a couple questions in this regard. Since the dawn of political powers arising, accusations made, like, I'll give you an example. Premier Ford, the whole Greenbelt scandal. You guys heard of that? How he released some land from the Greenbelt, and from there it ended up being like he gave it to his developer friends or something along those lines. When you hear stories like that, what do you think? Do you think he actually did it because he thought that that was the best interest in that moment? Hey, these developers are actually just good, and I think that they deserve to build here, and I know that they will. Or vice versa? Was it just to line their pockets? How are we to decide?
I think it comes down to two things. I think, one, it creates a negative stigma to the population saying, oh, this person is making this amendment or whatever in order to bring their friend in order to grease pockets and do this thing, et cetera, et cetera. Now, on the contrary, do we know that for 100% fact? Was there a bidding process? What was the process for this development company to actually go in and do it? Does the negative stigma outweigh that process?
But what does the process matter? Why do we need to know the process?
It's got to be fair. It's got to be fair.
I also think one of the biggest things, too, from this perspective is called rational choice theory. So at the end of the day, these politicians, every choice that they make is their own rational choice. So there's going to be a reason behind it, whether it be positive or negative. So who knows? We're never going to know 100% whether.
Do you think there needs to be a little bit more transparency around the process?
If there could be.
Because, I mean, there was an article written up about I'm using this as an example, about the way this Greenbelt thing happened. It was a developer group who actually has a really good track record in building homes. And I'm not trying to back any decision made. I mean, the housing minister did step down after this to avoid the flack. But anyways, he saw them at a dinner. The developers went to the chief of staff at a dinner, said, I want you to look at this plan. I mean, we are in a housing shortage. And when a developer comes and says, you should use us to develop this land, because we believe that we can build it soon enough, cheap enough, and make it affordable to everyday Canadians, wouldn't we want to give it to them? Or does the process really matter? Do we need to just ask everybody then, you need to compete? I mean, this guy gets into like RFP processes a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, Aryan, what are you thinking in this regard? Like, do we need to be much more transparent with the process so that we avoid, but then does the process affect us?
I think it's stick to one thing. Right now, we try so many things at once that we never stick to one thing. So when it comes to this, for example, giving to the developers could have been the right decision.
I mean, we elect our politicians to make the right decisions.
But
why do we give them flack?
I think it's the human bias of thinking negative over positive always. When it comes to politics,
that's
anyone
my
making
next
a decision, you're just thinking about, hey, just can't be right.
Why do we naturally have this negative bias towards every decision ever made?
Because the whole political landscape has been presented in the sense where it's like politics is greasy, it's dirty, it's a very thankless job in a sense. But when you do something right, you are praised.
But does that mindset is that mindset what's actually making it sound greasy? And is that actually influencing politicians and people to do it that way?
I think it's definitely a trend. You see on social media, a lot of these policies and a lot of these politicians, their agendas are based on these, like whatever's trending, current topics and whatnot, or current interest groups. So I definitely think that this whole negative connotation is stemming.
I mean, we have about 30 seconds left here. Interest group value. Are interest groups highly valued to the government? I mean, is there actually a fair point to say that interest groups do matter? I mean, we're talking like unions, we're talking, let's say GM as an example, or something like that. They matter, don't they?
It would, because many times they have sufficient funds that might play a huge role in a certain project. But then again, do we know about it? Is that told to us? Is that conveyed to us?
At the end of the day, even if these interest groups matter and you're transparent about it, you're going to have another demographic that will
be frustrated with it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Plus, you want the internal party to continue voting for you. So then it comes down to the legislation. Will they allow you to make it public.
Okay, I've got to cut you off there. We'll be right back to keep talking about this.
I'ma rule the world, I'ma rule the world, yeah. Rule the world, yeah.
Democracy contributes to ideals that give power to the people. You can vote for whoever you want with no consequences. The challenge this consequentially brings is politicians are more encouraged to make do for short-term gains. If they are challenged every 4 years on their position, for example in the States, of power, who's to say they are planning for the long term when as long as they impress you every 4 years, up to 8, or in Canada every 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, they can just keep winning votes in the short term. Guys, is our system broken in that way? And so this actually kind of goes back to the capitalist conversation and a little bit of democracy, but is it broken?
Politicians are playing 3 games. Okay, they're playing the political party for the betterment of the people, which should be priority number 1, in my opinion. They're playing the political game to keep their party in a position of power, to keep them, like their party,
Right.
relevant. And thirdly, they have to do what is best for themselves and what is maybe not the best for the opposition, because they are playing politics. They need to have a thing. What I think is politicians or the policy should go above and beyond with, regardless that person is in power, even after they're in power. It's like
But you can't
it's like an entrepreneur creating generational wealth.
But you can't moderate. You can't moderate that and actually hold somebody accountable to that, because like think about it. I want to win votes. I want to stay in power.
Right.
So let me just make the best short-term decisions around housing, let's say.
So yes, the system is broken. I would say yes to that.
But then
Just
it's
because
broken.
of the fact that it's temporary. Any solution that's made comes with a timeline, which is short enough. If you're not thinking about the country, then you're thinking about your party, you're thinking about you, which comes with the job, it's understandable. But then there's more to you doing the job. It's not just for you and your party.
But
It
then
affects actual people.
But it's
But
just
does
funny.
Does that value though, like short-term versus long-term thinking and the actual betterment of like the people of the country?
But yeah, but it's
you
just
know?
funny to me because, and I want to throw this to you. People give Prime Minister Trudeau, flack for his green policy. Carbon tax sucks. But in his mind, just to see it from his perspective, he's saying is, well, I'm thinking about the long-term future of Canada. I'm not thinking about right now.
So one of the biggest things I did want to point out was his EV. So electric vehicles, amazing. But if you think about it, let's say Canada establishes all EV, trucks still need gas. And to build these batteries, you're still creating carbon emissions elsewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
So at the end of the day, even though we're lessening our carbon footprint, we're actually creating it more
But
elsewhere.
even let's say
Mhm.
we are at lessening our carbon footprint, just for sake. Like, I'm not to get into a carbon debate here, but like in his viewpoint though, he's making a decision for the long term. But it seems like most of Canada hates him for it.
I feel
Okay.
like it's exaggerated though. At the end of the day, this is what I see as a 2030 goal. But at the end of the day, it's not really going to hit 2030.
You're saying it's not necessarily realistic, which is why
Exactly.
people are frustrated. Well, it's just ironic to me because you're saying is you appreciate somebody who thinks long term. He's coming out, he is thinking long term, and yet we don't
A short-term
Majority of
example,
Canada don't
a
support
short-term
him.
example with that I think was a completely mismanaged way of funds and could have been dealt with in a whole lot and way more efficient way was the ArriveCan app.
Okay,
You know,
fair.
so you look at that. There's massive trenches of water that these guys are going into, saying that this company got paid XYZ amount of money. What's going on with this? Was that the best use of our taxpayers' dollars for this point
But
in
they
time?
made a short-term decision that was of the best interest of the public, that they believe they needed the ArriveCan app right there and then.
Do you think that was the best use of the funds that could have been done at this point in time for the betterment of the Canadian
Playing
people?
Monday morning quarterback? No, I don't think it was the best use. But that's looking backwards. In the moment, we had a few months to make a decision. Let's create this app. Okay, we'll pay whatever it takes to get this done because people's health is the absolute priority. I'm just playing devil's advocate on what both sides could say.
I think people are not ready to wait because of the mindset created because of the problem, which is broken.
Right.
If it's 3 years, 4 years, everyone, including consumers, I'm talking the public, when they vote, it's on the basis of 3 to 4 years. Even they aren't thinking long term, right? They're in the spot thinking about someone just for 3 to 4 years.
Is there a
which
point to a politician planning for the long term when they're probably going to be out? Like, in Canada, you won't hold power for more than 10 years. Like, that's really good if you hold that.
Yes.
So is there really a point?
I can think of like the feminist humanitarian aid.
Okay.
So with the Liberal government, they had actually started having expenditures and they increase that expenditure. But let's say if the next party comes in, they're going to either get rid of it or
Right,
lessen
right,
the amount
right.
of spending. So to be honest, when he's talking about the feminist humanitarian aid, this is what we're doing. This is Canada's approach. But at the end of the day, it's not going to happen.
And the other thing too is like look at our election right now.
Mhm.
If Pierre Poilievre gets into power, then who knows? Half of what Prime Minister Justin Trudeau just put in for the last 8 years or 10 years could just be eradicated.
Exactly.
We don't have time to chat about this a little bit more, but we'll get into it in about 30 seconds, a minute here. Okay, we'll chat soon.
I'ma rule the world, I'ma rule the world, yeah. I'ma rule the world, I'ma rule the world, yeah.
How do political leaders make their decisions? Is it based off the best interest of the public, their party, to have the highest approval rating? As media shapes narratives and centralized power often drives decisions, how do political leaders navigate the demands of voters without compromising their party policy goals? Should policy goals align with voters first and foremost, or their party? What do you guys think?
I think policy should be based on the betterment and the popular vote for amongst all people.
Okay, not necessarily just the party,
Not necessarily just the party.
which is something we're seeing change.
I would still say party.
You would say party. Why?
I think it's something about loyalty, something about maintaining consistency.
Mm.
Because when you start saying that, you find you would find pride in relating yourself to that. Whereas if you're just, dilly-dallying every single
Right.
time with different things, they won't find enough competency with your party.
Right.
So
I agree with that.
Yeah, go ahead.
That was amazing because, to be honest, at the end of the day, the caucus is what you're trying to also approve. Because if you stray far from your agenda of the conservative agenda, the liberal agenda, and you just go towards like the public's interest, your caucus will be like, you're not the right fit as a representative.
And that goes back
what
to
if
your
you only-
being bold.
What if you only go a little bit? What if you're trying to do it to appease for the that's my inner humanitarian
Yeah.
coming out. What if you try and appease for the greater good of the people?
Well, I think that's what we're seeing with the party right now for the Liberals in Canada, which even Anthony, who is a Liberal, comes and says to me, he goes, I hear this from Liberals. I went to the Liberal convention with Bonnie Crombie, Christy Clark, Kathleen Wynne, and you get in conversation, and even like major Liberal supporters are saying is we're a party for all, which actually means we're a party for none. And so it actually does kind of come out at this point of saying is we're not being bold. And so people actually lose identity with that party. One of the other questions I have, because this entire segment's on power, public opinion, and policy integration, on the public opinion piece, the US election just happened and we saw public endorsements for each ringleader. So Kamala and Trump each had their own cerebral endorsements. Do we think that that's okay? Is that okay to be shaping public opinion in that regard?
I think it's fine for any person who is whether it's Canadian citizen and it's Canadian politics or American citizen and American politics, you have the right to freely express yourself.
When we talk about a division of society, I mean, that literally is what divides society more than anything, in my
I feel
opinion.
it works only because it's a democracy.
Okay.
Because, and the thing is, it is a democracy, so you just play by the rules, which is, well, you can do it, so might as well.
Do you think that public cares? Like, did you guys base your opinions on either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump based on
The
what
celebs?
Joe Rogan or Cardi B said?
So it's like,
Like, did you?
A bit of a bias, yes.
Really?
it's-
You did?
Me personally.
for me, it's about policy.
Okay.
It's about policy.
So Joe Rogan says Trump's the best guy for the office.
Let me see
Elon
the-
Musk's the
let
best
me-
guy.
Let me see the policies.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I totally agree. You can have as many endorsers as you'd like, but if you can't relay or articulate the policy you're trying to promote, then we can already see how you are as a leader.
Whereas
So-
for me, I could see it on the basis of character. The kind of celebs who were actually in the line, you could tell maybe this is how the leader is trying to lead the nation. And let's say for a minute, I liked it.
Right.
So maybe many millions of people might have just voted more for Trump.
Because of that, I actually
sure.
would find it hard to believe that the endorsements didn't help either or party. I mean, for people who love Cardi B, if they see Cardi B supporting Kamala, like at least like a core fan base, core fan bases,
course, yeah.
they would definitely support. One of the things I did want to get into, is it the best interest of the public for political leaders to follow the rhetoric that the media presents? Is the media, okay, but hold on, you say no? But is the media a good representation for what the mass public thinks?
No, not at all.
You don't think so?
I definitely think the media can be just it can be changed. The disinformation, misinformation that happens, on social media, everything can change. I don't think it necessarily represents the entire like
Yeah, it comes down to like change is constant. If I had to ask one of the media outlets, like, what's your source in that given moment? I'm not sure if even they're ready to be that transparent.
But also, there's been a difference of especially with the American election, the influence of where these voters have came from. You know, like where like Trump was doing all these different podcasts, virtually like not doing anything on mainstream media.
Yes.
You know, whereas a lot of stuff with Kamala Harris was a lot of that was being pushed through mainstream media narratives. You know, so it's just like, and you know, it's like when you have that ability to just go on and speak in an area like this openly and freely, you get a good sense of the policy coming from the person.
But what's
from
the line, real quick, because we have about 20 seconds left.
Yeah.
What's the line between the media or you as a political leader allowing the media to shape your perspective? If you're getting ripped apart in the media, why wouldn't you listen to it a little bit?
One way is giving benefit of doubt, which media doesn't do. Give
the benefit of the doubt.
Start there. That's basic.
So the media has to be more graceful.
Not graceful.
The media
Not
amplifies it
gracious.
either way.
But the media
amplifies
amplifies
either way.
It's yin and yang.
Okay, all right. Okay, we
Yes,
gotta
exactly.
end it there.
Exactly.
We'll be right back.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
I'ma rule the world, I'ma rule the world, yeah. I'ma rule the world, I'ma rule the world, yeah.
As strong personalities and effective campaign strategies dominate the headlines, have we lost sight of the important elements to an effective runner? How about the time when it was all about the policies and charisma of the leader of the party? I mean, I think back to like Barack Obama, who had arguably the best charisma ever in a U.S. president, and now like charisma for who just won.
Yeah.
I don't really see there's not a lot of charisma there. I mean, he's good in some areas, but publicly, I mean, a lot of people would disagree. But when we look at that, one of the questions that sparked for me was, what are some of the practical ways, I guess, we can keep equity in understanding their policies, but then also looking at them as an individual? Like, how do we find a balance and then equitable solution going forward for who to vote for?
And that's the thing. I feel like we're very divided in the sense, even amongst people within their own parties and their own beliefs, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, where it's like, do you vote based on the actual personality and the character of the person, or do you vote on this policy and it's backed up by quantifiable factual
But
data?
how do we,
like,
because like when no, go ahead, because when campaigns make videos, right?
Right. So it becomes more about the people doing the campaign videos as well. But when it comes to actual framework, I think policy first, right? Because people can be
But
replaced.
people don't care about policy.
But people are replaced and policies are not. It's something that people have to understand.
Right, but if
It's
people
attention to
don't, but
detail.
hold on. If people don't care about policy, then why, as a runner, if you want to win and create effective policy, why would you use policy as a way to promote yourself when you know that emotional strings are what matters?
I think that's what happened to our own like polity. So if you see right now, we have that division because when you have a political identity, it's starting to become your own identity. I see this now in the past decade. Before, a liberal and conservative could sit together and talk about and be very civil, whereas now
it feels personal.
Very personal.
It feels personal.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The best way to find a mutual agreement is to have a mutual enemy. So when we build that mutual enemy in politics, it actually works for your campaign strategy.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean you like that person that you're voting for, it just means that you don't like the other person. So part of their strategy is to just make you hate the other person.
But also, people aren't really accountable when it comes to knowing policies because they really don't care.
So how do we change that? Should media just eradicate any sort of political drama and just start talking about policy?
No, I don't.
Because then they lose viewership.
Yeah.
People really don't care about it.
Yep.
I think it's the way you disseminate these policies.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the policies that are coming out, a lot of people don't understand it. They only want to understand what they want to see, right? So a lot of the time they will disseminate their own, and then that's how disinformation happens.
I see.
So I think if we have the right platforms, individuals could disseminate those policies to educate and show awareness of what it actually means, fact checking. But nowadays we use social media and say, oh, this is true.
Well, it's funny too, because even Donald Trump, before the election, came out and said that he didn't really appreciate, well, not really, but he totally didn't appreciate how Fox News actually was not super pro-Trump before the election. He said that they weren't pro-Trump enough. And it's like when you hear a political leader say that, that really does influence the way that somebody views the media, and how his expectation was that the media would just support the one side because the other side supports that side. Like, that's such a big disconnect. I guess one of my biggest questions, and we have about a minute and a half left, would be regulation around how social media actually influences these decisions. TV is a little bit more, regulated, but social media isn't. Do we have to start coming up with ways around politics so that we can start regulating more policy-based discussions?
If you start that for one thing, it extends to other topics. So if it's
Agreed.
politics,
Mhm.
it could be.
But we're swinging
Any
so
other-
far the other way anyways. Like, it's becoming so divisive. Why not just teeter-totter it a little bit back with some regulations?
Because it's hard enough, because I feel like the web or social media, there is no owner of the web.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, if you look at the international realm, who is going to be that sole
Yeah,
sole
that's right.
person to have
Or,
that person
yeah.
accountable?
or for example, something that happened last year in Canada, Bill C-18.
Mhm.
Mm.
So I was in Europe. It didn't happen to me, but I was sending Instagram reels to my friends, and they told me they couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And for a second, I'm like, what do you mean? Because I didn't know it was actually into effect. But that's an example.
Do you think that it does matter following the drama of each political leader?
No, not at all.
Following, yes.
We've
Giving
got
into
15
it, no.
seconds.
Giving into it, it's a choice. But following, I'd say at least be aware.
At least be aware.
As a citizen, at least be aware.
But at the end of the day, I feel like there's a gray space where you're going to be aware, but then you're going to fall into that rabbit hole and you don't know how far you're going.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll leave it there. There's a little bit of a hook. We want to hear from you, especially if you disagreed or feel we missed something important. Join the conversation at My Generation on all social media platforms. With that, we'll end off with this. Do not simply accept what you are told. Challenge your thinking, engage in differences, and listen to new perspectives, just like we did tonight. Enjoy.
I'ma rule the world, yeah. 해가 지고 뜰 때까지 I'm up.